going to have a sales kickoff, a sort of marketing sales kickoff for the year. So the entire North American sales force of Frisky Dog Food come together for their national sales and marketing kickoff convention in Miami Beach, Florida. They're in the auditorium and the market director is up on stage with the Madonna mic, giving a performance that a revivalist would have been proud of, right? They're using the old pattern of call and response, and they're really working up the spirits of the team. So the marketing director's up there with the mic, and he's like, "Who's got the greatest dog food in all of North America?" And the entire sales and marketing team, hundreds of them all go, "We have." "Who's got the greatest advertising campaigns?" And all the hundreds of the sales and marketing team, "We have." "Who's got the most attractive packaging?" By this point, they're at fever pitch. They're all standing up. "We have." "Who's got the biggest distribution networks?" "We have." "Okay, so why are we not selling more of our product?" And all the team shout, "Because dogs don't like it."
Oh, nice.
So what happened with? Oh yeah. I don't have to explain it. Yeah, it's.
Do you know that's such a beautiful metaphor?
Oh, what a great comment from Henry.
No, such a great metaphor for.
But the way people build things in business. You know, we've got all of this great stuff, but no one's buying our product. Why? Well, because it's actually not any good.
Did you ask the dog?
Did you ask the dog? Yeah.
Digital celebrity squares. That's exactly what it is. That is exactly what it's like. Well, hello everybody, and welcome to this week's Digital Download. And it's lovely to have you all here.
Tim, did you just do a live long and prosper?
No, it must have just like slipped out.
Okay.
May the force be with you. Oh, look at this. This is terrible news. Our guest Jess Flack can't seem to get on. So whilst we're no, that would be me.
If it's a firewall issue, how about 4G off the mobile?
That's a good idea.
That might work.
That's a very good idea. Give that a try, Jess.
That one was rough, says Andrew.
There is some irony.
Oh, people have been planning this out for weeks, haven't they?
You couldn't make it up.
So many of us take our. I'm assuming Jess will be able to get in, so we might as well start by discussing and teeing this up. Many of us take our digital connectivity and understanding of the digital world for granted. We build our strategies around being online, about being digital, about having a web presence, about engaging with people on content. And we as a business, all of the benefits that we offer is helping clients to exploit that opportunity. And, there's so much proof. I was going to say data and stats, but there's so much proof that the world has gone digital. With the latest Simon Kemp and Reportal data, which came out just this week, there are 8.01 billion people in the world. There are 5.16 billion people on the internet, and of those, 4.76 billion are active social media users. And what we see is that people are becoming more digital. That same bundle of stats shows us that in the last 12 months, the world's population has grown by 0.8%. The number of people with internet access has grown by 1.9%, so 2.5 times the rate of population growth. The number of people who are active social media users has grown by a staggering 3%, which again is half as much again as the number of people that have internet access. And we as a business have been thinking not just about how this impacts on other businesses, but how this impacts on us as a society. There's an opportunity for digital and particularly social media to level the playing field. People that have been dispossessed and haven't had a voice can now use social and digital to have that voice, to connect with people around the world, irrespective of time zones and costs of distribution and all of those wonderful benefits, so many free resources for them, so many opportunities for people to make friends in the business world or the real world, to find like-minded people, to aggregate their knowledge with the knowledge of other people. Truly outstanding. But what happens if you can't get online? What happens if you don't have the skills to be digital? Most of us have been at some point in an environment where someone has said, look, it's easy, you just do this, and then click a button. But what if you haven't got that? What if you grow up in an environment where people don't have mobile phones and computers, or in a household where people don't have mobile phones and computers? What impact does that potentially have on you?
I think I first that whole sort of like stopped in the tracks moment came for me in 2015. I know exactly where I was. I was my friend Simon Biltcliffe, who at that point, very successful businessman in his own right in Yorkshire and in Oxford of all places. But he was starting out on a political campaign to join a particular party, which was all about making Yorkshire better. And I was talking to him about their manifesto, and he said the number one lead item on our manifesto is free, high-quality internet for every single person in Yorkshire. And I think in 2015, I remember the conversation. I said, "That's it, the number one. Surely there are bigger issues." And he went, "There are no bigger issues." And I said, "Why?" And I didn't really get it back then. I've had epiphanies since then in learning, but he said medical, education, communication, really important connectivity, just feeling connected for people, parents, children, businesses, whatever it might be, pensioners, all need internet connectivity. The world is just going to get more and more advanced, and we're going to get to the point where if you don't have the internet, or have the internet but don't feel confident enough to use it, or don't have the skills to use it, you're going to be excluded. You're going to be isolated from society that's just picking up and moving towards digital. I think in 2015 I was like, yeah, okay, good idea. But just looking at daily domestic and business life for ourselves, we're in a very fortunate position because we're in the sweet spot where we can absorb every change, we can get it, we can move on. Something like AI, ChatGPT, Chat AI, all these things come in and we go, oh, this is really cool. We jump on, we learn how to use it, and we see how we're going to absorb that into our business and domestic lives. And then all the way right through to the person who now no longer can pay for their parking because it only accepts, digital payment, and they don't have that, and they don't, well, you just get an app. What are you talking about? Just get an app? What do you mean? So the massive swathe of, and I think for some of us, the lucky ones, we haven't noticed the massive digital shift in all aspects of our lives, but some people really do because they can no longer do things, or there's a whole. I'm a video gamer, right? And it never fails to surprise me where I find a game, it's all online, and I go in and there's a massive community that have been playing it for years. It's all been happening, and there's ways to do things, there's language and all of that, and I didn't know it existed because I'd never clicked on the button and got in. And there's now massive domestic issues and commercial issues happening on the other side of that digital curtain that people are completely unaware of, and it may be holding them back in life, or they might just shuffle off this mortal coil having never known it existed. But yeah, I think. So that whole piece, and the reason why she's crying, so that was supposed to lead on nicely too.
So would you like to introduce our guest?
Yes, absolutely. So I've been chatting recently with over this subject with someone who's a specialist in this subject, someone who's actually now working with a county council here in the United Kingdom in Essex, and their lead title is the lead digital inclusion officer. Now think about that. That's incredible, right? That's incredible. So it's Jess Flack. I don't know if Jess is here, is she?
She is. She's in the green room, and I'm just about to let her in.
Hey!
Hi, Jess.
Yes.
We can just
Talk about digital exclusion.
There was a beautiful irony to that, wasn't there?
Yeah, you know, it's my job to not be digitally excluded, and I couldn't even get in. So I do apologise. That was option.
So the whole thing
To
that we
an
were talking about,
amazing.
I think we've got a tiny little delay, but we'll
Yeah,
deal with
I
it.
heard most of it.
The whole thing about people having access to the internet, and not only just having access, because that's one thing, most people have access these days. What do you do when you're there? How do you get the skills that you need to operate in a digital world, both domestically and commercially? That whole issue is something that you're looking at very seriously with the Essex County Council. And so can you take us back to the start and just tell us how it all came about?
So I've been in the role for about 8 months now, and said it's taken really seriously in Essex, but it's taken very whole of the UK. There's a lot, not necessarily the case that we're promoting it as well as we should be. It's a bit patchy, and there are pockets of really great. And I went to an event with the Digital Poverty Alliance, who are a really great group to follow, fantastic in this space, a couple of days ago. And they said that what they're hearing on the ground is there's actually almost too much support, to the point where people don't actually know where to go. Is it right for me? What, you know, am I in the right bracket for this piece? That sort of stuff. So it's a fantastic area to go into, because it cross cuts every area of our lives. But it's also kind of frustrating some to be able to connect the dots a little bit more. So yeah, I work Essex County Council, and I have my role is part funded by Suffolk and North East Essex ICB, and as part of Essex County Council. So I'm able to kind of have sort of a overview of what's happening, all the amazing things that I can sort of connect into an outward facing role as well, which is fantastic. So what you said is 100%. It affects, you know, we only have a fifth of households online. Actually, no, a fifth of households aren't online. That's the best way to put it. I did put all of this stuff down and have all the research in front of me, and then all this went wrong. So bear with me a sec. And it's sort of affecting lots of different groups. We focus on the 3 A's effectively: access, affordability, and adoption. So we have an amazing Digital Essex team who focus on the connectivity side of things, who are organisations to put Wi-Fi broadband in, especially in our rural locations where we don't have great coverage. And then we've got lots of other initiatives. You may have heard of social tariffs. Have you heard of that?
Yep.
No.
Okay.
No.
Stunned into silence. Tariffs is really broadband tariffs. Individuals who are on universal pension credits, and they're there to support people or have access to broadband packages. There's lots of work been done around at the moment, kind of trying to get people to know about, easily switch over. Then you've got the Good Things Foundation, who are working on the National Data Bank. So you might have seen over Christmas there was a lovely campaign by O2 called the Snow Ran. Don't know if you saw that, where and she's not connected to her family, and then her family give her a little Christmas card that's got some data in it to put in her phone, and then she melts because she can connect with them. So that's in effect what the data bank is. Mobile connectivity for quite a broad range of groups. You need to be sort of 18 plus and have mobile connectivity, types of things. So there's lots of great work happening. But like I said, it can be patchy. For me, it's about sort of connecting the dots more than reinventing the wheel or creating new stuff that's just going to overwhelm people who are what's out there to support them. So hopefully that came across okay. I promise I practiced this, but it doesn't sound like it came across.
Yeah, no, that was really good. And I think that certainly one of the issues, so my mother is 88 and she has got Virgin Media at home. And when we log on to iPlayer and we get that little thing that goes around, and I say to her, yeah, sorry, it's buffering. To which she says, say what? What are you talking about?
Yeah.
And
Terminology.
Yeah, and I think that I mean, you said about connectivity. An issue certainly in the more rural areas of this country is one of lacking infrastructure. So when I moved into this house 12 or so years ago, we had BT broadband and it was 2 meg. And that was the fastest that we could get it because it was carried down copper cables and the nearest exchange was 7 miles away. And this is also a not spot for mobile access. So if you stand out at the end of the garden, you know, in the middle of the bit with no trees around and hold your mobile phone up, you can get enough coverage to send emails or make a call, but the rest of the time you can't. And then we went from that 2 meg to having about 7 years ago fiber to the premises. So we can now have 300 meg and 150 meg upload speed, and we can run obviously mobile phones through Wi-Fi calling now. But up until that point, it would have been really difficult to convince somebody the validity of being online and seeing the benefit of digital. Because one of the things that we get when we've got our mobile phones, we've got 4G or 5G and we've got ultra fast broadband, is that everything just plugs together seamlessly. So you can have a video call with someone, you can transfer to your mobile, you can send and receive emails and browse the internet and all of those things and stream movies. And it all just seems so effortless. But you just put a few small chinks in that armor and everything falls down. And what you remove from people is that they fail to see the point in a lot of cases.
But you also know what to ask for, though, don't you?
Sorry?
You know what to ask for.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, my mum, you know, my mum is 85. And
a youngster.
Yeah, she's a mere youngster, yeah. And but she has it all sorted because she doesn't know what to ask for. She wouldn't know whether she was being ripped off or whatever. So it's only because she's being helped. And there must be people out there that don't have that help.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm like, I'm not familiar. Sorry, Jess. I'm not familiar with any like Canadian resources that are similar to what Jess is speaking about in the UK. And so my grandma just turned 89, and he has a mobile phone with all the data on it, but he can't use his hands. So it's completely useless that he has all that data because he can't do anything with it. My grandma has a phone that has all the data on it, but she's mostly deaf. And so telling her and this is something actually we were at the listening doctor yesterday, and I was really interested in this because hearing complications mostly impact your comprehension, right? So the amount of words you can comprehend is much lower. So if someone's trying to teach you something, you can, my grandma can comprehend 48 out of every 100 words. And I feel like in the tech age, we're trying, we move so fast, right? We're you just do this and this and this and this. And the comprehension doesn't exist. So I think I really love what Jess, you're saying about how we use it, right? Because we need to have that piece of it. And I just keep thinking, if somebody had started helping my grandparents in 2015, when people started talking about this, they would have 8 years of practice using this. So maybe they could deal with the comprehension issues and the mobility issues, but nobody, they live in a small farm town, or they did until they moved into long-term care. And they there's nothing. There's no support for that. They don't have a computer because their computer will get stolen if it's in long-term care, right? So there's societal complexities that also play into this, and that is a contributing factor.
Can I
Absolutely,
ask a question,
100% agree.
Because it seems that there's kind of two main differentiators that are driving kind of your analysis. So one is kind of age. We've been using plenty of examples from ourselves about elderly parents, etc., and their ability. And then the other range is around kind of income spread, and especially for people at the low income end, you know, perhaps the difficulty they have with access. Is it fair to say that those are really the two main drivers that you're doing your analysis around, or is there anything else that we're missing here?
Yeah, so I would say those two things are a really big part of it. But going back to Adam's point around you know, people not really seeing the point of things and giving up on things quickly, the motivation piece is quite a big part of this puzzle. So a lot of it is, you know, if you can hook people into a reason why they need to use the tech, then you can bring them into that conversation much easier. So a good example would be you know, somebody who the health outcomes and might need to be able to use this, but is frightened and put off of everything that they hear about technology, including, you know, us talking to them about scams and, oh, you know, you can't do this, and if somebody knocks on your door and, you know, tell them that, you know, something really bad. Also needs to be there as well, and that's one of the more difficult challenges for some of the old groups. So you've got actually the older generation, who some of them are great at tech and are quite happy to use it and just sort of continue on, and you've got other groups who would be pretty good at it if they could be bothered or you know, were motivated to do it, but they're not really seeing that connection to them and their daily lives enough. And then you've got groups that struggle to get online because they can't afford it. So yeah, that kind of plays into the adopt side of things, so the skills element of it. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you.
Can I just pick up on some of the amazing comments that are coming in from our? There's a comment from Richard Urage. My take on the digital divide, Jess, digital poverty, is that it's every bit as real in this country as elsewhere. If I had to rely on BT for my super fast broadband, my company would have died. Rural areas are poorly served. We use a community broadband service. They're a complete lifesaver.
Well, obviously I can't comment on any of the names that have been used there. I think, yeah, there is a definite issue, especially, and one of the things that we're working on in Essex is real communities, because they are especially hard hit by some digital poverty. And it's not just residents, it's businesses. This is about business transformation too. Governance, you know, how much we're missing out on in our small businesses. In Essex, we are 95% plus small businesses. So there's a real entrepreneurial element in Essex. And, you know as well as anybody else, if you're a small business owner, you're just about maybe quarter, you don't necessarily have the time or the inclination or the resources to go out there and look for better ways to be doing your job. You know, technology should feature, but doesn't necessarily feature as much as it could do. And that, I suppose, is the next point in this piece of the puzzle, is that how do we tap into things that already exist that we can bring into support around these things. And that's one of my next articles that's going to feature is this big thing called social value. Just a really cheeky, cheesy plug there. It's all Eric's fault. He made me do it. Do you guys know much about social value and what it can bring and kind of really what's happening across the UK with this term?
No.
This into the mix as well. So social value is really kind of been brought into play to support businesses, and we use it in local authority to kind of really get more for less for the council. It focuses on sort of social, economic and environmental impactful working and changes. So whenever we put out for a particular element that we're doing, whether it's construction or new technology or all of those types of things, within that we write in, and there's a national calculator, so that's themes, outcomes and measures. And what we've done in Essex is localize It means that on a local level, we can say these are the things that we really want to focus on. Might put in schools with access to work experience or apprentice, making sure that we are doing lots of greener initiatives. So if something's being built, we're also planting more trees, those types of things. And it's fantastic because you know the impact that you're making. So for guys, I want you to be a digital champion, and you're, well, I'd really like to, but you know, I'm at work and I could be fair enough. But if you're offered a couple of volunteering days that are paid, which is what happens at Essex County Council, we can quantify. So if you come in and do yours, maybe, you know, four half days over a year, digital champion, local library, for example, which is what I'm doing, we can quantify the impact that you have in terms of social value. And the thing that I'm focusing on at the moment is using these volunteering days to say, okay, how are we transforming the council to do more with less? Because let's face it, that's what we're doing. If we're bringing people into this digital conversation and enabling them, you know, have more access online, then they can access council services. Face-to-face interaction is more costly than online. All of this sort of stuff comes into play. So it's a really interesting way to look at how we can do more with less, look at relationships that we've got that grow. If we're working with Microsoft or Amazon, what can we get from them to support our local communities and build up a more sort of socially impactful way of working?
So is it all about
getting silent?
Is it all about getting people involved with that initiative?
Yeah,
to get people involved.
Yeah, so a really good example organization who's got this down to a T is Virgin Media O2, and I can mention them because they're doing some amazing stuff. You may have heard of them. That's in Manchester. They have 5 volunteering days that they're all paid a year, and a lovely lady, Emma Weston, who's the CEO of Digital Unite, has helped train up staff so that they're all digital champions, and they're all going into their local communities with and it could be young people, you know, you're talking sometimes they need a bit of extra support or confidence, right up to somebody who's 96. I mean, that's awesome, isn't it? It's incredible. Yeah. So yeah, it's about sort of really thinking about how we can leverage the relationships that we've got for positive change. But social value is a really good one because it's great. So if you think about it in the terms of years back, corporate social responsibility, that's probably a term that you might social value, that fantastic tool. So what it can mean is if you operate and you're doing stuff in Essex, it can help you win business. It can help you have better conversations with schools, because they speak the language around something called the Gatsby benchmark. So this is what Ofsted require schools to kind of benchmark all of their careers around. So you can have a sort of better, more positive relationship, thinking about, you know, well, we'd like to offer, you know, that's Gatsby benchmark 5 or 6. Those relationships become much connected. Does that make sense?
Yeah. The only reason we look sort of like blank when you stop speaking is because there's a 5-second delay, and we don't want to all just clamor in.
Okay.
So when you watch this back, you'll see that we've said things. Then there's a big massive air gap, and then you give us your beautifully eloquent response. I'd just like to pick on something that Kenny Wood put in there. It's a belter.
Hi,
Kenny says. There's still a lack of understanding with the world of digital. This week I had a chat with a McDonald's franchise. He was highlighting the frustrations with the digital world. McDonald's is fully online, including applications for jobs. He's still being sent applicants applying for jobs with paper CVs directed by the DWP, unaware that it's fully online. He's also had to provide iPads for the new staff who can't get online. Their training is online, and some staff can't access or don't have the soft digital skills. So there are some gaps that come out when we think, easy, just stick it all online. It'll be really easy. It'll be really simple, and it creates problems and challenges, right?
Absolutely, and you'll find well, certainly I found in this job, it's a bit of a can of worms. So mine is involved in so many different initiatives. I work with sustainable growth, economic development, skills team, technology teams, you name it, and that's a great thing for me because I love to be kept busy. But there's a really great quote from the DPA, the Digital Poverty Alliance, which says that this is to interact with online when, where, and how you need to. So this can be health outcomes, job prospects, social isolation. If you think about what happened over the pandemic, transformation, like I've mentioned, for businesses. So it's literally that huge can of worms, and there is no kind of one kind of thing solves every. Some of the better initiatives are ones that cover everything. So you get your connectivity, and you also get support with skills. If you try and cover just one thing on its own, it can be really difficult to get the momentum and the motivation to continue on. So yeah, Kenny's completely right there.
Yeah, spot on. I have to read this out because this might be one of the best things I've ever seen written on a live show. It's romantic, it's poetic. I'm hoping that she wrote it on her own. It's quite a dystopian view of all of this digital transformation, but Leah Schmidt wrote this a little while back in the conversation. I have to read this out. All it takes is one solar storm to go back to stalking elk through the damp canyons forests around the ruins of the Rockefeller Center, all wearing leather clothes that will last us for the rest of our lives. You'll climb the wrist-thick kudzu vines that wrap the Sears Tower, and when you look down, you'll see tiny figures pounding corn, laying strips of venison on the empty carpool lanes of some abandoned superhighway.
Sounds like The Last of Us.
Wow.
It sounds like The Last of Us, doesn't it? It does sound like The Last of
Yeah.
Us.
It's a Hunger Games, Maze Runner dystopian view of well, it's the future, isn't it? Let's be honest.
Well, and like I have to think that those. Go ahead, Jess.
Sorry, I can see that. I was just going to say they've been trying to do Ted Lasso, and someone's brought in the rest of us.
So
well, and I have to think this has like some degree of impact on, like, I think about how my grandparents grew up, right? And like when my grandpa was a little boy, they had an ice box, not a refrigerator, right? Like I think they see these things and they've got to be like, well, no, at the end of the day, it's going to come back to farming. And I live in a very like rural area as well. So like farming, and we grow potatoes and wheat, and we make bread, and we do all of those things. And this technical thing is just like, it's a thing that's happening on the side. But then, like my grandma, something that we've come up against lately is the appointment booking system for the labs are all online, right? Which means that she can't actually book her own lab appointments. I have to book her lab appointments for her. And there's no way for her to access the service. So you can't, like, she calls in and they are like, you have to go online to book. And she's like, I can't go online, which means an 85-year-old woman now can't get lab work done, which isn't, as far as I'm concerned, isn't acceptable, right? Mm-hmm. So I think I'd love to hear from your perspective, Jess, some of the things you've seen that businesses have done as they're shifting into the digital landscape, because it does make, like, I get it, right? It makes everybody's life easier that everyone can apply online or everybody can book online. I get it, but how do we help the people come with us as a company? We're creating those digital transformations.
But the issue, isn't it, that it's companies often put themselves at the center of things. So what they're looking for is to make economies of scale or process or whatever, rather than thinking, how do we make this as accessible as possible? And you know that yourself, because it's really easy to go to insert company name here for any company that's large that you deal with. It's very easy to go to the online chat bot and the FAQs. It's extremely difficult to actually speak to somebody now because of the cost involved in doing so. And, you know, we need to have surely a fundamental remapping of how companies engage with their customer base. Now, if you're talking about Vodafone and you don't want to talk to a chatbot, you want to talk to a person, and it's really difficult, you've got a choice of other mobile providers. If you're talking about your council or the government or HMRC or the NHS, then you have a fairly major problem because you haven't got an alternative. They've got a monopoly, or in some cases, there's a cartel, and they all behave in exactly the same way within that region.
What you're saying, Adam, is really timely. I've literally spent about an hour on the phone to HMRC this morning, and it was so exasperatingly frustrating. I mean, I was swearing like anything, shouting around, because they've got an AI recognition. So first of all, they ask you all these questions, and all you they won't they won't give you the kind of doctor that you're looking for. It was I'm surprised actually. It's lucky you can't see what's in front of you, because you'd probably see the office is wrecked. But I think it's exactly that, you know, and I can understand, because people are looking to do this at scale. So, you know, they're always averaging to say, okay, well, what's the kind of average person here that is going to use this, and, you know, we'll make it fit for them. But either side of that, you've got a really huge range, you know, and if you are at the kind of lowest end and you haven't got, you know, the ability to do it for various reasons, as you've been discussing, you know, when the subject of today is how do we open the digital world to more people? Well, that's a key barrier to entry for a lot of people, because it's just not fitting with who they are and how they operate.
The social case has been covered extensively here, but I think we bypassed the business case. That McDonald's example is the business case for this. We talk about the need for access for the social reasons, but McDonald's can't afford to not hire those people that are having trouble accessing it. And there's got to be a similar clientele for many businesses that don't have the access, don't have the instruments, and don't have the acumen. Yet we've realized the economies of scale are by bringing things more and more digital. So there is a business case to supporting more development in all of those aspects for the economy as a whole.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I would say from the sort of business perspective, there's some really interesting stuff that's coming out of some of the conversations that I'm having on the ground with users and organizations like Citizens Advice, for example. I went to an event recently where we were talking about supporting sort of ex-offenders with digital literacy and various other things. You think about it, you come out of prison, and what do you have? You have a list as long as your arm of application forms for things like housing and any benefits that you might need, and all these types of things. And if your literacy is low, and your digital literacy is even lower, you're excluded from the things that make you a part of society and a human being. And one of the things that the Citizens Advice was saying was that application forms is one of the number one things that they get calls for. So blue badges and all those types of things, and it's so hard for them to have the capacity to go through online application forms with people. So there are services that have been set up to support around some of these things, where you can literally call up and they will take you through an application form and kind of help fill it out for you. We Are Digital really good for doing some of that stuff with Majesty's Courts and Tribunal Services and Windrush and visas. But an amazing stat, which is also really quite scary, is that I think the DWP have said that there's £1.7 billion in unclaimed pension credits from 21 and 22. So what that kind of tells you is that this particular group is so digitally excluded, maybe the skills, maybe the motivation, maybe the the lack of access, they can't even claim the credits that enable them to live a better life. And I think you're right. If a lot of the talk is around, you can't, with some of the services, you can't just go digital first. You need to have other options that can support people, and there will be a slow trickle. And we can't just wait for particular groups to die out before we move on to other things. because there are still groups that really struggle. And application forms, like I remember being a recruiter years ago, and we had a thing where people would complete a written application form and we would scan it and it would go into a system and it was managed that way. So there are things that we can do. So it's a really interesting thing, but definitely I think organizations need to think more centrally around the user rather than putting the business first. But easier said than done, right?
Well, they have an obligation, don't they? You know, if you are making a statement about who you want to work with, you know, for us as a business, we can't work with people, not in terms of employment, we can't work with people who are not digital first because it's what we do. But we can certainly help people that are not digital first, that don't have those skills. But for many organizations, they've made a statement of intent that actually they want to be inclusive. And if you want to be inclusive, then you have to find a way to make it work. And you must put something, you know, maybe your corporate social responsibility, or whatever your new term for that is.
Social value.
Social value. Putting that ahead of purely profit and refine, you know, shaving another fraction of a penny off this. And, you know, if you think about Will's comment about spending ages getting through to HMRC, when you get through to HMRC, they're delightful people, they're really helpful, they're really knowledgeable. And yet it seems that there are so many barriers, you know, they become the friendly, smiling face of a government department that actually we don't like because it's about taxation. And they would be really good if they were put at the leading edge of that. So you could talk to somebody at the first point that you reach out to them, because then you wouldn't be so fearful of that department. But actually, it makes it so awkward to get through to them that in the end, you just give up.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Alex, did you want to say something?
I was going to touch on something Jess mentioned earlier. Kind of triggered a thought about the opportunity that there is to sort of digitally transform the way that we operate, to be more inclusive, or to help, you know, citizens feel more inclusive. But then it kind of got me thinking, there's so many examples where companies have done quite big projects, digital transformation projects, that actually result in a diminishing experience, a worse experience for whatever reason. And so, you know, what does, you know, for someone in your position, I guess, within the council, what sort of things can you put in place to quality control the projects, the digital transformation projects that other companies are doing?
So I think a lot of it for us is about advocacy. So we're in a really good position. Well, I would like to think so anyway. We're in a really good position to advocate for, you know, positive changes, and we've got some experts. Ben Onsworth is one of those in this area. And we could potentially leverage the good work that we do and how we do it to support digital transformation for other organisations by kind of, you know, potentially using some social value, some of our volunteering days to get out there and tell them about the good work that we do. That would be one of the ways that I would look at it. It's a very different way of thinking, of working. You know, our council, I have to say this, but our council is very progressive in how we like to do things. We like to do things differently and think differently, and really think about a project as something that covers lots of different things, so you're making more of an impact. That's not to say that there aren't other councils that do the same thing, but I think if we are in a position where we are fed information directly from central government, and they're giving us great hints and tips and useful advice on all of the things that we can do within our own council to make those changes, then we have an opportunity to advocate that information getting out to all of our smaller businesses, you know, in a sort of cost-free, friendly advice kind of a way. I mean, that's how I see it, but, you know, you may have different feelings about your own local council. Would you see them as a good place to advocate this sort of stuff? So if the information came from them, would you think that was a good thing or a good place to get that information from? I'll throw that back out to you.
Yeah, I think so. I think the challenge, though, is with such a big opportunity, so many companies are going to get on the bandwagon and potentially deliver projects that aren't, reaching a certain quality level.
Mhm.
And so,
Yeah.
as a council, how do you govern that? How do you have a quality control to ensure that companies that are delivering these projects to improve the experience for the population are actually improving the experience and making them more inclusive at the same time?
So there are certain there's legislation that you need to work towards. You've got organisations that support around making sure that the work that you're doing is accessible. And I read about something yesterday. I'll try and remember to put it up in the chat later on. That when you're creating something that is accessible and digital first, especially if it's a sort of wider used piece of tech and it can help support with services, that there are certain criteria that you need to have. But you're right, like quality assurance and quality control. If we're directly working with a particular organisation to create a project to support residents on a particular thing, then we have a lot of say in how that happens and how we do that. But external to that, it would be our sort of in our best interest to be given advice and sort of advocating on positive things that people can be doing. But like, we wouldn't necessarily have the capacity to get involved with every project that makes that change, unless it's part of something that's contracted into us where we can have that say. And then it's just about, I mean, there may be, I'm not an expert in this area, but there may be some sort of, kite mark quality assurance things that we could add on top of the things that we do. I've seen a great piece of tech around, accessibility stuff. AbilityNet do some great work as well. So you can actually have organisations like that check that the things that you're doing are inclusive and accessible, and do the things that they should be doing when you're creating digital transformation. Hopefully that wasn't a really sort of political, not a yes and not a no response. I do try to answer questions.
Thank you.
But
Well, and I think to some degree it comes back to just like having that intention as part of your digital transformation, right? So if we know that, okay, there's this business case for digital transformation, and how does that impact our users? Because even like I worked for a tech company. One of the solutions that we provided was this like in-store data collection mechanism for retail stores to collect customer information and permissions and surveys and all those things. Half the stores had a problem with connectivity, so they couldn't actually use the solution, right? So I think it's just about reminding ourselves that there are these digital limitations, and if we're looking at digital transformations, if we're looking at digital project implementation, how could this digital divide limit people's ability to access the system or to take advantage of this helpful thing we're trying to give them, and make sure that that is part of the conversation? Because as I think we've all experienced in different areas, there's always a digital limitation. So let's not forget the intention of minimizing those digital limitations when we're talking about digital transformations.
You are 100% on the nail with that. And there are so many examples of how some great apps have been developed, and they're wonderful, and they've done fantastic user testing. And then they found out that the people who they're supposed to be sort of accessing for this particular piece of tech haven't got a smartphone. So it doesn't work. And that 100% is the challenge. And I think obviously that, when you're talking about your user groups and focus groups and all this sort of stuff, that should be fundamental to anything that you put together. Ask the people that you are putting out this app or this piece of tech for in the first place. I have two great assistants in the form of my kids. So anything that I'm trying to put out, for example, writing a strategy that has to go out for all of Essex. Now, I don't know if you know, but nationally, the average reading age is about a 9-year-old. My daughter's 10. So I got her to read the strategy for me. And she's like, no, that doesn't make sense. And they are my user group, my focus group. If you get it right for the base, that bare minimum, you'll get it right for everyone. And actually it makes it easier to adopt technology that does meet those sort of minimum baseline requirements. And I'm talking about making sure that we get this right for neurodiverse. Somebody's mentioned that in the chat. Send and inclusive. We need to make sure that we have those base requirements, and then build on that. And yeah, so my children, I'm sure if you need focus groups of a 7 and a 10-year-old and are willing to pay in Pokemon cards, they'd be more than happy to support.
Jess, for those who don't follow Jess, I'd be surprised if you don't. She's just started a weekly article series on LinkedIn explaining all of this and all of the different facets of it. Keep leading the way on this. You are a proper change maker in this digital world, and I think you've come in here. Okay, we battled with some tech issues, but that's, we got there. You're here. But we learn from you. Please make a date to drop back in with us at some point and give us the latest updates on your learning, because this is a phenomenal journey that you're on, and ultimately you're trying to help people have easier lives as the world changes. So we're going to let Jess go, if that's okay, and we'll catch up with you later on, and we'll just finish up the show.
Thank you very much.
On our own.
Thank
Thanks
you.
so much.
Thanks for having me. Take care. Bye.
Bye. So, like Andrew, who said he is a legend. Well, he said I am legend, but we're talking about dystopian films. Jess is herself a bit of a legend.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's such a fascinating topic, isn't it? And as she was talking and we were kind of thrashing out the kind of parameters here, I was thinking to myself, the really worst bit about this is that the people who are not digitally enabled, who are digitally excluded, those people are stuck in a feedback loop, aren't they? Because they don't know that this is a possibility for them.
Yes.
And they can't complain about the fact that this possibility is not open to them, because all of the communications that tell them that they can complain about it are done digitally. And the method for complaining is a digital method. Yeah. So it's like, how do they break out of that dreadful scenario? Like, we've got no coverage here. Oh, well, you just need to, we used to get this. You just need to go online and report it. Well, clearly, I can't go online to report it because we've got no coverage.
There's a hole in the bucket.
My coverage checker is saying that you do. Well, the number of bars on my signal is telling me I don't.
I've got a really funny story.
I can't.
Just yesterday, we're all for, what Jess is doing, what her team's doing, and what she's looking out for, and her peers that are trying to digitally advance the human aspect of all of this in the world, are doing some great stuff. And we're all on this screen digital pioneers ourselves that are doing things in new ways through digital channels. But I just have to share with you just a funny little thing about the digital transformation of life that happened to me yesterday. The famous food store Itsu, you may be familiar with it.
Yeah.
I decided I walked through the biggest shopping centre in Aberdeen yesterday, Union Square, and I thought, oh, Itsu. I remember when I used to go to London, I used to like Itsu. So I walked into the shop, and it's quite small, right? So I walked up to the counter to the two good-looking young guys in the Itsu gear. They've been hired because they look like models. They look the part. They both
look, old man. What can I get you?
They look like Harry Styles, the two of them, right? They're standing there. And I said, can I have a sushi box, please, and an aloe vera drink? And he went, you can't order from us here. You have to order at the digital ordering booths. I said, all right, the ones that I've just walked past to come to you, even though the stuff that I want is right behind you. And he went, yeah. So I had to walk up to the digital ordering booth. The shop's empty. It's just the two Harry Styles with the stuff that I want just behind them. And I looked at them. While I was looking at them, I'm now 7 meters away from them, 7 meters away from the stuff that I wanted. And I had to go on and go into the menu, find the thing, touch on the thing, find the drinks, add to cart, blah, 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 pay.
You had to do the thing in order to get the thing.
I had to print off a ticket. It said printing your ticket. They're both standing there looking at me. There's no one else in the store. Print off the ticket, took it up to them.
Computer says no.
Computer says no. By the time I got to the table, the computer had told them to pick the thing off that I'd pointed at earlier and the aloe vera drink, and they put them down, and I gave them the ticket, and they sort of went, yeah. Okay. All right, guys.
A thing of great
You turned back to them and shouted, "Get off my lawn!"
But okay, this is a really great example of like a balance between digital and people, right? Because the people could have done that, right? The digital can do it, but the people could also do it. I went to a restaurant lately. We did this like girls' lunch. And they have the same thing, right? They got the QR code on the table. You scan it. The first person who gets there is now like the leader of the table, and they have to let other people in, right? Ooh. So now what you've done is you made everybody who's come for a social lunch sit on their phone. You force them to do that, right? Like, and now you order on the phone. There's no menu, right? And you don't look at the menu on the phone and then order with the waitress. And there is a waitress. You order on the phone. And then it allows you to like split the bill and everything. And so there's some cool aspects of the technology. Yeah. But what you've done is you've taken people away from the conversation and forced them to go on their phone. And the waitress was actually quite lovely, right? Like, and she was very conversational and we had fun with her, but she's not doing anything that a waitress historically does, right? And you're just like, did we think about how this impacts the human experience before we did this so that we could hire less people, right? Like we've implemented the technology. So now I can have one waitress who serves the whole restaurant because all she's doing is bringing people things.
But this is where the technology is put in front of the customer and the customer experience, isn't it? We've got this new app and by God, you're going to use it whether you want to or not. And, we see so many organizations that behave in this way. Yeah. And, we have a
restaurant in town that went to that exact same model, but it wasn't because they wanted to hire fewer people. It was because they couldn't hire. Yeah. And I had the exact same complaint because in my family, we have a no phones at the table rule. So we go to this restaurant and every one of us has to bring the phone out. It completely defeats the social aspect, as you were saying, but it's become kind of a necessity in some ways, because otherwise that restaurant literally would not be able to exist without it.
Hey, we discovered some cool stuff today
that I feel like we're missing. And then, but there's also a flip side, right? Because this is what I was dropping something off with my grandpa yesterday. Like I said, he can't write, right? Like he can't hold a pen anymore. The complaint forms are forms, handwritten forms, right? Yep. It's the only way that you can register a complaint. And I'm like, this is not actually possible now for him to register a complaint. It would be a lot easier if he had like a voice app on his phone where he could just say the problem.
But registering complaints, who wants to be so what used to happen allegedly was Ryanair, one of the budget airlines in the UK, their complaint line was a premium pay fax line, and the fax machine was a fax that was on a roll, and it used to spit out of the fax machine straight into a bin. So you would fax them a complaint and nobody would ever even bother to look at it because it would just be on the roll going straight into the trash because they're not interested. And that's the case, isn't it? If I make it as difficult as possible for you to be able to complain, particularly because you're the one for whom this service isn't designed and therefore you are most likely to complain, I can then exclude you from complaining in order that I get 100% satisfied customer base.
We like to finish on a bombshell. Look at that. They were so preoccupied with whether or not they could that they didn't stop to think if they should.
Hashtag Jurassic Park.
Hashtag Jurassic Park. Look, this has been an absolutely fantastic session, hasn't it? I've thoroughly enjoyed it. And what an eye-opener listening to Jess talk about how she's making this more accessible to people. And it's one of those issues that, we're all kind of aware of, but to have it brought front of mind and so we can actually think about some of the challenges people face is just really brilliant.
And what a lesson to business leaders and leaders in any form of society around the world. The councils are now realizing that digital is not an option anymore, and we need to get people enabled. Absolutely brilliant. Mic drop, Graham Dallas.
So thank you all very much indeed. Have a lovely weekend, everybody. thank you all for your fantastic comments
Amazing.
today. Absolutely brilliant, and some lovely to see some new people in there as well. So have a great weekend, and see you all next week, I hope. Bye bye.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.